All right, we're here with Sara Fung, and I'm Dr. Nurse Dan. This is going to be our first LinkedIn Live, and so I'm going to start us off with this is a test of change. This will work. There may be background noise, there might be fumbles and missteps, but we're going to test out this platform and have a great conversation today. So I just want to thank Sara Fung for joining us today. She is the RN resume nurse. And let me just give you a little background. And Sara, I'd love for you to fill this in. So she has her bachelor's from Western University, her master's from University of Toronto. Maternal child health is your passion from a clinical standpoint. And you love helping nurses find and thrive in their careers, find their next role and thrive in their careers. And you've built a whole business about it. So you're an entrepreneur as well. What did I miss?
Well, you missed the fact that I'm doing a kitchen reno right now, and I'm so sorry that there's construction happening. But it's part of being a nurse is rolling with the punches. So I also do have a master's degree in nursing. That's not super important, but I do have a master's degree. I am the co-host of the Gritty Nurse podcast. So I've done lots of work around advocacy, and like you said, I'm really passionate about careers and helping nurses find their path in really something that has so many diverse options, and I really want to let nurses know what they are. And in a very weird way, I'm able to combine two of my passions. If I wasn't a nurse, I was actually thinking about becoming a journalist because I love writing. So in a weird way, I was able to combine both of my passions, and now I'm doing what I really love. And I really enjoy connecting with nurses and helping them because I feel like nurses are my patients now.
So what was that catalyst where you decided you wanted to take this route with your career?
So I started out at the bedside. So I was at the bedside for about 8 years, and then I moved into nursing leadership. And although I wasn't a manager of people, I was often asked to sit in on interviews with the manager. And I saw a lot of really great nurses with not so great interview skills and not so great resumes. And one day I thought, if only someone had helped them prepare a little bit, they might have done better. And then I started thinking about how I never had any training in nursing school. I don't know about you. I didn't have any training about resumes or interviews or any knowledge about careers outside of the hospital. And this is something that I really think is lacking. So I wanted to be that person to help nurses. But of course, I didn't know if it could be a business. I just started out slowly and kind of seeing where it would go. And it sounded like a lot of nurses did want help. And that's kind of how I started.
Yeah, you definitely found a gap. I mean, I remember my first job. I started at UCLA in Southern California as a new grad. And I remember interviewing in the ER there where I ultimately got the job, just being like petrified after that interview, like how scared I was and the questions they asked, I was not ready for. I was preparing for like, where'd you do your clinicals and, what makes you want to do ER? But they were digging into some other stuff about, who you are. And I just had no idea. And I came out of that like, there's no way I'm getting that job. And I just started like applying other places. And so do you find that with nurses as well? They just kind of don't have any preparation for what that first sort of conversation with the hiring managers might look like?
I think so. And it's like you said, everyone's really scared, right? But if you know what to expect and you can answer the questions in a way that makes you seem like a good candidate, there's really nothing to be afraid of. And it took me a really long time to realize that you're interviewing the employer as much as they're interviewing you. Mm-hmm. So when I first started, I was just so desperate to get the job that I would say whatever I needed to say to get the job. I would say whatever I thought they wanted to hear. But then I started to realize that, no, I need to know what I'm getting into as well. I need to know really practical things like, what does my schedule look like? How long will I have orientation? What is the pay going to be? These are all important things because a lot of times I think nurses are looking to get out of a job they don't like, but they're just jumping into another job with a new set of problems versus looking for something that is actually going to further your career and make you happy.
Yeah, sort of. I see in the comments someone called it the care plan for yourself, which I like that idea of, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve long term, and sort of piece together that piece. And, for me, I've also taken the very non-traditional path of leaving the bedside and doing all kinds of stuff and never really had a plan with it. But as I went through all those pieces, learning you can stack these experiences together to actually build the career you want. And, I think that's sort of what's important. So, what I want to talk about today with you is really like the shifting workforce of nursing, and you're helping tons of nurses sort of rethink what they want to do with their careers. And I really want to get your insights on this stuff. So, from your perspective, globally with all the nurses you help, what drives the nurses you're working with to seek your mentorship and start thinking about changing their career?
I think mainly it's really been about experiencing the burnout that we always talk about, not feeling valued, not feeling appreciated in their current role. And it's a lot of times it's fear, lack of knowledge about how to step outside of their comfort zone. So whether it be applying to a new unit or even a new organization, a lot of nurses have been very sort of sheltered throughout their whole careers, sort of moving from one unit to another, never really having to put themselves out there. But when they think about what they really want in a career, and maybe it's shift work, maybe it's not, maybe it's at the bedside in a hospital, and maybe it's not, they just have no idea how to go about doing it. And I don't blame them, because we're made to think that as nurses, you could get a job anywhere, anytime. And I think one of the misconceptions is that you can get a job anywhere, any place. But the truth is, there are places that everyone wants to work, or I would say a majority of nurses want to work, and there are places that very few nurses want to work.
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely get a job somewhere, but is it where you really want to be, or is it because you don't like where you currently are? And a lot of times when I do coaching with nurses, I say to them, it's okay to not know what you want, but knowing what you don't want is equally important.
Yeah, it's okay to not have the exact job sort of set up, but you want to know what parts of the organization, the team, the people you work with that you definitely don't like, and making that really clear. And that can help you make that decision really well. And for those of you watching and in the chat, we can see the chats there. So ask questions, put provocations in there, and we'll try and pull those into the conversation as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. What trends are you seeing with nurses right now in their career? I think if you were to ask nurse leaders, which is sort of my audience, they would say, there's a lot of people leaving for travel. There's a lot of people wanting more flexible sort of shifts. There's nurses leaving the bedside and starting their companies. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what trends are you seeing with the nurses?
I'm seeing a huge interest in work from home or remote jobs. So that's probably the number one thing I've seen over the past year, is just because a lot of hospital systems are not flexible with what nurses need to balance their personal lives and their professional lives. They're looking for that opportunity to either work from home or work in a clinic or somewhere that provides them that Monday to Friday that they're really looking for. And I think I've also seen a huge interest recently in entrepreneurship, something that you and I know about. And again, I really think it boils down to having that work-life balance and more control over your schedule, over when you work and how you work. That's really the ultimate thing. And when you work in a system where you feel so disempowered and like you have no voice and you're not appreciated, I don't blame nurses for wanting to find something better for themselves. And I think that there's nothing wrong for sure with working in the hospital if that's what you want. But if you're looking for something more, it's certainly right now it's the work from home. It's the having a regular, so to speak, schedule that is really driving, I think, a lot of the interest in what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's really interesting. So sort of going all over the place to find the life they want, which, I mean, nurses have been in the driver's seat for a long time. I think we call it a nursing shortage now, but we've always been in a shortage. It's like we've never been out of one. And so, nurses really can command the next step in their career. And I find, I'm curious about this point. So when I was working with Trusted Health, a staffing agency, what I found is most of the nurses were when they reached about 5 years of experience, that's really when they got the itch to maybe leave the bedside or do that next sort of big shift in their career. Do you think there is a such thing as a 5-year itch? I don't know. I feel like every nurse I talk to is like, I've been a nurse 5 years and I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And for me, I thought like, maybe it's because that's when you sort of reach expert status. You're sort of in routine. You figure out how to do the patient care stuff, and you're like, you want the next challenge. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, if it's a 5-year itch, I think I have a 2-year itch, because I feel like with my own resume, every 2 years I was looking for something new and I was starting to get bored and I really wanted to challenge myself. So I never had a 5-year stint anywhere, but I think 5 years is maybe just what we're told. And we're told that like, You go to nursing school, you graduate, you get a job in a hospital. Supposedly it needs to be med surg so you can get all your skills kind of up to par. And then maybe we're just told that 5 years is the mark to where you need to either stay where you are or look for the next thing. So I don't know if there's something around 5 years, but it was never 5 years for me. And I know a lot of nurses that I work with have been travel nurses in their entire careers.
Yeah.
So really they work in 13-week stints at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that either.
Right. Yeah. And that was something I was really interested in, is like how it, I think the data was, on average, nurses join travel, do the travel thing for like 2 to 3 years, and then they kind of figure out and settle down for a little while and maybe come back to it later. But, I was trying to think, how do you, travel is such an interesting career opportunity. You can work in the best and the worst hospitals across, the world, or the countries, and you can build a superpower. You can become one of the best nurses on the planet because you see the best practices, you see the worst practices, and you can incorporate that and actually be, I used to call it like the special ops. You're the special ops nurse now. Like and you can come into an organization and help them transform. I think too many times our nurse leaders don't actually, leverage that talent that they have, that they're actually paying a premium for.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, we've done a podcast episode with a travel nurse, and he really explained it as you need to hit the ground running, right? Because you're there to fill the holes and you're there to work the shifts that nobody else wants to work. And you have to be, you can't be afraid to ask questions, and you have to get to know people right away because there's a limited amount of time for you to do that. So I really view them as like, in my head, they're like parachuting down to save the day when everyone's panicking. And
right.
And there's something about that I think that people really love. It's that adrenaline, it's the changing environment. It's you never know what you're going to go into, and if you don't like something, you're going to be moving on in a few months' time anyway. So it's just that lifestyle that I think is really appealing, and also being able to live and work in places you might not otherwise be able to go to is great as well.
Yeah, no, good insights there. So I want to take one from the comments that we're getting here. So one of the LinkedIn users asked, when a nurse comes to you sort of ready for the next step, maybe they're frustrated with what's going on in their current career, or their current facility. Have they usually tapped out their resources there? Have they gone to try to address it, i.e. met with the manager, tried to solve whatever was bugging them and then come to you? Or are they sort of like, I'm done, I'm out, and just move on?
Well, truthfully, I don't think very many people go to their managers to address the situation, because a lot of times they feel like it's something out of their control. So they're just feeling burnt out. The nurse to patient ratio is too high. The schedule that they get is really just what they get. Where I live in Canada, a lot of the nurses are unionized. So it's not really like you can just pick and choose your shifts. You're kind of stuck with what you have, and you need to either make it work or not. And I guess that by the time a lot of nurses come to me, they've already tried on their own to apply for jobs, and they're not getting responses, or they've gone to a number of interviews and they didn't land the job. So they've already tried on their own, and they're just hitting a point to where they're not sure what to do next, and they don't feel like they can go on in their current situation.
Yeah, in my experience in California, similar, nurses are unionized, and I think I've been working with some of the unions on rethinking what the future of workforce looks like for nursing, and I've challenged them on that idea of seniority. I said the next generation of nurses, while I respect the seniority piece, and I know that's what the unions are built on, and you sort of earn that level. At the same time, the next generation doesn't want to be stuck on night shift for 5 years in order to get the day shift that they want, or be stuck in that unit that no one wants to work in order to earn the spot somewhere else. And so we have to rethink that, I think, and what are the benefits of staying around, but also challenge some of those assumptions, or the workforce, or we're going to see a lot more churn of nurses, not sticking around and moving through things. So, yeah, it's, for me, I love innovation. So whatever status quo thing we can push on, I'm all for it. So one question I want to ask you is, what's surprising with your clients? What's something as you started this work that just jumped out at you? Like, I had no idea nurses were thinking about this stuff, or any other sort of surprises that you find with your clients?
I think that not all nurses realize that they're all feeling the same thing. So the typical way that someone reaches out to me is that they'll send me an email, or they'll find me on one of my social media platforms. And the first thing they'll say is, I'm feeling really burnt out. I just don't think I can do this anymore. And they'll come up with some reason to justify why they're feeling what they're feeling. And I'm always like, listen, you don't need to justify anything to me. I know where you're at. I've been there. So I get where you're coming from. And if you want to look outside, that's fine. You don't need to explain anything to me. You don't need to ask for permission to do what's right for you. So I think that's the number one thing, is that if you're feeling a certain way, most other of your colleagues are probably feeling the same way. But the fact is, if you're willing to take that next step to see what else is out there, I think you're ahead of the game. And I think that nurses have a really hard time asking for help, not just professionally, but personally as well, just asking for help with things that you may not be great at. And, I talk a lot about how I had a career coach several years ago, and she really helped me understand that I wasn't happy where I was and that there were other options out there. And I think another thing that really surprises me is that not all nurses realize that they can negotiate their salaries. So they think that you need to accept the first offer. And I'm like, no, that's just a starting point. Unless you're unionized, there are so many things that you can negotiate. Like I have accepted a job where they were not able to go up on the salary, but I was able to negotiate my vacation time, my benefits, my start date. Like these are all things that you need to at least ask about, because if you don't, from a fiscal standpoint, I think they're always going to give you the lowest offer possible, because that's going to save them money. And if you don't ask for it, then you're not going to get it.
Yeah, agreed. That was a thing I had to learn as well. I didn't do it so much as in my staff roles, but definitely as I took other roles in the system. With my first job outside the bedside, I was like, "Oh, sweet, that sounds great. Whatever the package is, I'm happy to get it." And then I talked to like my friend who's watching today, Dr. Courtney Caulfield. She's like, "No, you negotiate." She's like, "Let me tell you about that," and she's an expert at it. And so, learned that you can ask for things that aren't even out there. Sign-on bonuses and all those type of things that are just out there that you wouldn't think about, and you're not exposed to in nursing school or with your peers, because it's just sort of not common practice within the nursing profession. You look at physicians and our other care team members, they're doing this all over the place. So I think it's another great point that, and especially in a shortage, you own that job. You can decide, and there's 35,000 other ones hanging out somewhere else, roles out there. So, really don't be afraid to negotiate. Usually recruiters are expecting it. I find recruiters are surprised when you just accept it right off the bat, that you haven't pushed back on anything. Is that something you find as well?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's partially because nursing is so female dominated. So being female, being someone like me, a person of color, being a parent, maybe you feel like you shouldn't ask for things that you feel like you don't deserve, but you need to, because if you look at what other industries are doing, like you said, it's the norm. And I think there's this other misconception that if you try to negotiate your salary, that they're going to take away the job offer, which is absolutely not true.
Right.
I have asked recruiters about this. And the worst thing that can happen is if you try to negotiate their salary, they might say no. And then you decide if you're going to accept it or walk away. That's it. They're not going to take away job offers. So don't feel like for a second that you can't at least negotiate your salary. And the other thing is, don't ask for the salary that you want. You need to go a little bit higher, because chances are you're going to meet in the middle. So if any recruiters are listening today, they're probably going to hate me for saying this, but it's true. You need to ask for probably 10 to 15% more than what you actually want. And the plan is to meet in the middle, just like when you're negotiating for, I don't know,
car.
Like anything. It's like what the number given is flexible. Okay.
Yeah.
Everything is flexible.
Yeah, agreed. So no, another great piece of advice. So get out there and negotiate, and know that, you're in the driver's seat at this moment being a nurse. And there's way more open roles than there are nurses on the planet at this point. So use that to your advantage. We do have a question from Dr. Courtney Caulfield on here too. And she wants to ask you about nursing schools. So she said, how do you think nursing schools need to adapt to new clinical settings and roles in nursing? So, this is something that I've talked about and hypothesized about. Could nursing school change to have an ambulatory care track where you can go directly into clinics and not have to pay your dues in the hospital? Could we have a telehealth track? Could we have, work from home entrepreneur tracks in nursing school? And we see that in some medical schools. I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
It's funny that you asked me, because I was just talking to someone yesterday about the fact that like I have a friend who wanted to be a nurse, but she could not stand the sight of blood. She would pass out every time. And
Mhm.
she actually didn't apply to nursing school just because of that, because this was 10 years ago. And she had said to me, "Is there any way you think I can get through nursing school without having to deal with blood?" And I said, "Honestly, no, because the way you're supposed to go through nursing school is you have like a med surg rotation, you have
Mhm.
whatever." But just like how we're talking about how nursing is so diverse, why can't we have diversity in nursing school? Why can't we have placements in outpatient, even street nursing or research nursing? If that's where you already know you want to be, why can't we adapt a little bit? Why do we have to be so prescriptive and so traditional? Because I talked to someone the other day and they're like, nursing school is set in 1950. And I totally
Mhm.
agree, because the year I graduated was 2007, right? But not that long before, nurses were still having to learn how to make beds, how to fold hospital corners, how to wear the right thing. I still had to wear the white shoes and all that. So it's taken us so long to progress. I really think we need some sort of catalyst to push us in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, another friend of mine, Dr. Chris Lawson's on here, and we've commiserated about this. But I failed, I failed L&D in my nursing program. That I got, and if I fail, it's 78%. You have to get 88% to pass, or whatever the thing was. And it was, and like that follows me around now. And and I never had to use that knowledge in my clinical practice. So it's like I wonder how we can still meet that standard of knowing the core content, but then also specializing it in different ways. Even if it's like you specialize in critical care, it's not you're going to be an ICU nurse, but you get more of the critical care content, and then you hit the ground running. And we have this better transition to practice. And I think we do need to challenge that stuff. I love that thought that it's from 1950s. I use the analogy of like nursing school. Nurse health systems are they're still on the flip phone, and then you go to like nursing schools and they're like on the show MASH where the radar guy was like winding up the phone to talk and he only got connected like once every 10 times. Like that's the technology that we're using in nursing school. So we definitely have an opportunity, and I know there's nursing schools ready to transform, and I think we just need to double down on that moving forward.
I think I made a post a while back about how a lot of hospitals are still using pagers, and you chimed in on that, and we're still using faxes of all things.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
why are we?
triplicate. Yeah, we have
And
forms
we
in
have
triplicate.
we have EMR systems that are still DOS based, and
Right.
people don't believe me outside of healthcare when I tell them. And I'm like, I wish I was making this up. I am not. We're 30 years behind, and sometimes it's better just to like start from scratch. But I know that there's so much like bureaucracy around that. Like
Mhm.
trying to upgrade something versus trying to just burn it to the ground and start over might be easier.
I know there are some days where I say that, and then I posted recently on LinkedIn a guide for tech people to join healthcare, and it came from a post with Becker's that said, all ex Google, ex Facebook, ex Meta, whatever are deciding that they want to join healthcare as their next sort of technology role. And I was just like, well, you have to realize that you're not going to be starting with like Google AI as your baseline. You're going to be starting with a mainframe system with C dash colon slash, enter and DOS based programs. So, don't think that you can come bring your awesome, cool tech over here without understanding, up until recently, some of these hospitals are running on Lotus Notes email, which was built in 1982 by IBM and has been defunct for the past decade. Like it's just crazy the systems we have, and there's 183 of them that don't talk to each other. And so I so resonate with that piece. And we do need tech help for sure, but understand what you're jumping into here. I want to ask you about the future of the nursing workforce as well. So, we have lots of trends happening, shifts in how people think about work, how they're applying for work, the types of roles that nurses can do. What's your prediction for the future of the nursing workforce in, let's say, the next 5 or 10 years?
I was talking to someone about an app that they're creating, and it's essentially Uber for nurses. And I thought that was really cool because we're in a day and age now where I really think that it's nurses in the driver's seat. So you should be able to pick your shifts. You should be able to pick where you want to work. And kind of going back to what you said about seniority, I really think nursing should be more merit based. So rather than your years of experience, it should be the quality of the work that you deliver. And with this new app, it's like you fill out your profile, they vet you and everything. Once you go work a shift at a facility, you rate each other. So you rate the facility, they rate you. If you rank higher, my suggestion was to them is that they should get perks. Like maybe they get earlier access to benefits. Maybe they get more mental health support. So I really think it's about flexibility that people are looking for. They're looking to feel appreciated. They're looking for things like safe patient ratios. They're looking for adequate training. And what that looks like, I think, is just something that needs to evolve. So going back to what you said about nursing school and clinicals, does it have to be the way that we've been doing it? Could there be some of it that's offloaded? Could it be more high fidelity simulations? And then you do a short portion where it's in person. Like, I think we just need to innovate. And there are these bottlenecks where I am, where so many nurses, or so many students, I should say, are applying to nursing school and they can't get in because there aren't enough instructors, there aren't enough clinical placements. Once they actually do get through, they're leaving because it's not really what they thought it was going to be. So we need to really challenge the system and meet people where they're at. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to lose more nurses.
Yeah, I love that. I love that thought. And yeah, the Uber for nurses is interesting. I think there definitely are challenges on the credentialing side of knowing the skill and making sure that they're oriented to the facility and things. But, the flexibility of just-in-time work, I've been working with nurse leaders on that to say, you're always going to have a core staff. There's a group of people that want that stability of working at a facility all the time. But you can't be, we don't have the data yet to be super predictive on who we need at any given moment, what the patients who are going to come in the hospital that day, or what needs they're going to have, what skills we actually need. So you have to have sort of this bench of either local, gig work, or, float pool, or whatever that flexible model is, so that you can supplement your core teams with the talent that you need at any given moment. And the groups that do that are, I think, the ones that are really going to thrive moving forward.
Yeah. And one of the things that actually surprises me a lot about nurses, now that I'm working with so many of them, is the lack of understanding about how much LinkedIn can help you. And I know every single person watching right now is on LinkedIn. So the fact that you're even on LinkedIn, I think, is great, because I keep telling nurses, this is the number one thing you should do for your career. When they talk about, how do I find more job postings? How do I network with people? How do I get in contact with recruiters? It's like, actually, LinkedIn will do all of that. All of that and more. So they're, rolling out new features all the time. And I think just even knowing what those are will really put you ahead.
Yeah, I recommend everyone get on LinkedIn, and I think our nurse leaders, in whatever capacity that is, are getting on it. I think we could do better with our staff nurses and direct care nurses to build profiles, because it's where people find jobs, honestly, and it's a great platform. And I found a ton of value just in connecting with my buddies and future colleagues on it. So we have just a couple minutes left here. So I want to ask you two questions. One, you push nurses outside their comfort zone. I think, that's what you do in your coaching. What are some tips to help nurses sort of challenge the idea that they have to be in the ICU because they started in ICU, or whatever their sort of preconceptions of what their career looks like? How do you push them?
Well, I think the first thing is that a lot of nurses think that in order to apply for a job, they have to meet 100% of the qualifications. So that's not true, because when people put together a job description, they're putting together what they think is a unicorn of skills that you have to have. Like, this is what a unicorn candidate would have. But the truth is, if you can meet even 60 or 70% of those qualifications, you should apply, because chances are there aren't going to be that many people, if any, that meet 100% of it. And maybe this is part of our training as nurses, that we feel like we're not adequate, or maybe it's just, again, being a female dominated profession. But you should apply for things that you feel like you mostly meet the qualifications for. So that's one thing I would suggest. The other thing is that it's okay to think about skills that you've developed outside of actual nursing. So a lot of nurses come to me because they want remote work. And I'm like, did you talk about the fact that you can use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Excel, or even how to run a Zoom meeting? And they're like, I know how to do that, but I didn't do that at work. And I'm like, does that make it any less valuable? I don't think so.
Right.
So it's just taking charge of your own learning. Or I'll say to them, why don't you take a course in Excel if you want to learn it better? Like, you're not going to learn it at work. So why not just take that on yourself? And it doesn't have to be something where you spend hundreds or thousands of dollars. It could be something as simple as a YouTube course, or a Udemy course, or a Coursera course. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like, it's just being more innovative with the skills that you can transfer into a new role.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, it doesn't have to be done at work to be valuable to an employer. Even your hobbies matter in some capacity because they show different skills to them. All right. So I want to wrap us up with the last question here. Give us 3 tips for nurses to land their dream role.
I would say number one, be clear with yourself about what you want. Because what I used to do, and a lot of nurses I know do, is just apply for anything and everything you might be remotely qualified for. So be really clear and intentional with yourself about what you want. Number two, don't underestimate the value of networking. So whether that be in person or on social media, like a platform like LinkedIn, the people you know, they may very well help you land your next role. So don't undervalue that. Even something like even a loose acquaintance, someone that you've met a couple times, they can probably help you.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's the second thing. And then the third thing is probably just being more confident with yourself and the skills that you have, and knowing that you don't need to ask permission to take that next step. Like you need to know within yourself that you can do it, and other nurses have done it, and you can very well do it as well. So I think just like knowing that about yourself is super important. And it's hard because in nursing, we've been so kind of devalued for so long. It's hard, but you really need to gain that mindset shift of being more confident and changing your mindset.
Yeah, those are really awesome comments and tips. And I'll just give just a personal note on it. I don't think I've ever gotten a job where I just blindly applied for it. It always apply plus the network effect always led to the jobs that I enjoyed the most. So get out there and connect with those people, even if they're, second or third connections. Just send a note. You'll be surprised how many people want to help and find awesome people just through messages on LinkedIn or Instagram, etc. So don't be afraid to reach out. Sara, I really appreciate you being a guinea pig with me on our first LinkedIn Live here. Thank you for mentoring me through it and being so awesome. And where can people find you? I mean, you're all over. So where's the place to get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
Well, I mean, the easiest place is if you're on LinkedIn, just send me a message. That way, it's probably easiest. You can go to my website, which is thernresume.com, and send me a message that way. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So you can find me all different ways. And I'm really happy to help nurses in any stage of their careers. If you're also thinking about starting your own business, I can help with that. I have an event coming up in May, which is called Level Up Your Nursing Career. I'm doing that with another nurse named Farah Laurent. So reach out to me about that as well if you're interested.
Yeah, go check her out. She's awesome. Lots of amazing content. She does LinkedIn Lives as well. So make sure you follow her and reach out as needed. Sara, thanks so much. You can find me on drnursedan.com or a ton, 5 million times a day on LinkedIn. We appreciate you joining us for my first LinkedIn Live. Thanks again to our guests in the comments, and we'll check you next time.